Let's talk about basic visual effects. Something you should consider when creating visual effects, you have to know when to separate your layers and when to blend them. Here I have two examples of blending on shots using chroma keying, or green screen as it's commonly called. Time and improved technologies have a lot to do with the relative quality of these two scenes. So in this scene from Labyrinth, keep your eye on the edges of the characters.
Ludo? Ludo? What's going on? What do you want?
We just have to have a good time.
In the wide shots like that, and especially in the close-ups, you can see almost a halo around the characters, either a kind of greenish color or a black halo. And there's a sharpness and a lack of motion blur around each of the characters that makes them stand out from their composited backgrounds, almost like they're a bad Photoshop. And then in some shots, it's just downright messy.
Like the man said, don't lose your head. Hey, I'm a wild child. Woo! Walk tall. Yeah.
Although the makers of Labyrinth, including the Jim Henson Workshop, held practical effects and brilliant art direction at a high priority, visual effects like keying and compositing weren't given quite as much time and investment as they are in more contemporary fantasy films, like the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Technological advancement also has a lot to do with the improved quality of this next scene.
I suppose you think that was terribly clever.
Come on, Gandalf. Did you see their faces?
There are many magic rings in this world, Bilbo Baggins, and none of them should be used lightly.
It was just a bit of fun. Oh, you're probably right, as usual. You will keep an eye on Frodo, won't you?
2 eyes.
Yes.
As often as I can spare them.
I'm leaving everything to him.
What about this ring of yours? Is that staying too?
Yes, yes. It's in an envelope over there on the mantelpiece. No. Wait, it's here in my pocket. Isn't that odd now? Yeah.
Although Peter Jackson did use a lot of practical effects like forced perspective and the use of body doubles, there were still a certain amount of digital visual effects going on in those films. So here's a few things about graphics. You should use contrasting colors to help separate your text or graphics from the background. Always be sure to work with the highest quality elements. And remember, you're trying to sell something to your audience, so if you're working with text, make it legible. Here's an example of what can go wrong when you don't ensure your text contrasts with the underlying footage.
どうもロボット産業社長のロボットと申します私何かできることありましたら何でもおっしゃってください
Domo arigato, Mr. Roboto. And you?
すぐにやってくださってありがとうございます
You speak Japanese?
A little.
Well, you might be a cunning linguist, but I'm a master debater. I'm looking for my father. He was kidnapped.
この椎茸食べてみてくださいよ。
Please eat what?
Wait. He said, please eat some shiitake mushrooms.
Tell me, what do you know about my father's whereabouts?
あまり良い話ありませんね。
Your ass is happy?
No. He said, your assignment is an unhappy one.
Oh,
ネズミがしょっちゅう出て大変なんだ。
nice potty mouth, dirtbag.
ネズミがしょっちゅう出て大変なんだ。
Oh,
どっちにしても大変な問題ですよ。
yes, quite off topic. Thank you very much.
Why don't I just speak in English?
That would be a good idea now, wouldn't it? That way I wouldn't misread the subtitles, making it seem like you're saying things that are dirty.
I'm sorry to hear about your father, but I can't help you. Please excuse me. I have another appointment.
By the way, Orinoma Moto de Kaito. Enough.
So that's why it's good to use yellow for subtitles. If you're using images, use the highest resolution available. It just looks unprofessional to have a pixelated graphic element. Remember, you can always lower the quality of an image using effects and filters, but you can't raise it. This one's kind of obvious, but keep your text legible. Let's look at some common visual effects and processes. Color correction can really serve two purposes: to literally correct color differences from shot to shot, or to achieve an aesthetic effect. This featurette explains how the Coen brothers film Oh Brother, Where Art Thou was the first feature shot on film to use an entirely digital coloring process.
For 100 years now, post-production for live-action movies has largely been the domain of the film laboratory. All sorts of photochemical processes have been used over the years to create the final look of a picture. When it came to Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, filmmakers Joel and Ethan Coen and director of photography Roger Deakins decided to depart from convention. For the first time, the look of an entire live-action feature was manipulated digitally.
The major challenge of this picture was the final look.
Roger Deakins and the Coen brothers approached us while they were in the pre-production stage of the movie. They had an idea of what they wanted to see on the film. They didn't know how to get to that vision.
So we want it to look, very dry and dusty and have a sort of feel of an old picture book.
Before Roger came to CineSite, he had already spent about 3 weeks at a lab using photochemical processes, various different types of photochemical processes, to try and get the look he wanted.
What we're talking about is trying to replace some traditional laboratory processes that have really become archaic in the world of digital post-production.
When they were talking about this picture, and they were talking about this Dust Bowl era sort of look, and so then became this whole issue how to alter the image enough to get the look they wanted. Let's go in Mississippi. So, okay, well, when are you shooting? They said June, July. I said, well, it's going to look just like Ireland. It's not going to look like dry and brown and dusty.
Answer printing is a process that has been going on for films for 50 or 60 years. Every film is shot out of sequence. When it's cut together, the color needs to be balanced. And I think the best example I can give you would be a chase scene that is shot over a 15-day period in all different times of day, different weather from day to day, and ultimately needs to look like it all happened in the same 5 minutes.
Conventional lab work actually is fairly restricting. I mean, you've got 3 primary colors you can balance between. A red, green, and blue. So you've got 3 color separation.
Even the solution that develops the film itself can cause that to drift toward the magenta, toward the yellow. So it's a hit and miss process.
Then you've got additional techniques that can be used, which is like bleach bypass, which is a process where the silver, which is basically the catalyst to the color development, you can leave it in the negative or the print, and that acts as a sort of black and white layer within the emulsion. You can flash it. You can flash the negative, which is basically expose the negative to an overall light level, which basically softens the whole look. It fills in the shadows and gives you a sort of softer look. You know, there's techniques like that, but basically you're stuck with the balance between the three primary colors. What happened is we started thinking, well, is digital technology far enough along?
What we're trying to do here is what we're calling digital answer printing, where you incorporate digital tools up front in the process.
As we began the process, the biggest challenge is really matching what you see on a digital display to, in simple terms, a television display with what you see in a theatrical environment on a movie screen. The way the digital intermediate process works is to take the film negative after it has been conformed. In other words, it's all been cut together, all the shots are in the right order. We bring it into here and we put it on what's called a data cine. And that data cine takes the film and it transfers it into a digital format. While that's happening, we are also color grading every shot in the film. To do that, we use what's called a color corrector, and the colorist is somebody who basically works with color. So the client may, whether it be Roger Deakins or someone else, may say, can you make that more red? The colorist can make it more red. He can take someone's face and change the color of the face. He can take a shirt and change the color of the shirt. He can really go in and adjust very carefully the elements in the image.
The final image seems a little bit yellow, doesn't it? Probably those trees were a little bit more brown on, doesn't it?
Once that's been done, then we take it into a computer workstation and we do all the fades and dissolves. So when the picture fades to black, we do that digitally. If you dissolve from one scene to another, we do all that digitally. Once the whole film has been assembled on the digital workstation, then we record it back out to film again using a laser film recorder. And that's where we merge in with the traditional process again. The film goes to the lab, it's developed, a print is made, the cinematographer looks at the print, decides that he likes it, and then multiple prints are made which go to the movie theaters.
Now, if we were doing this film and it had to be done chemically, we wouldn't have got nearly the look we've got. We would have had to, you know, filter the original negative. We would have gone through a whole series. I would have probably ended up flashing, developing the picture, shooting with a sepia filter on the camera, all these sort of things. But because we knew we were going to come into Digital Suite, we actually shot a very clean negative. And of course, the joke is that Joel and Ethan never want to see the film printed in color from the original negative because they saw one shot and they were just like so appalled because it's just the antithesis of what we were wanting to achieve. But in order to have the control digitally, you wanted those saturated colors so you could actually select them later on as a digital image.
I think it's quite likely that familiarity with this process would change the way a film gets made. For instance, we have a process that we use where we can key off a particular color. We can eliminate all the colors around it and only bring that one color back.
What this shot is an example of just how powerful the tools we have in here. As you can tell, we've taken out all the color in the background and we've just left the blue of the flower that the clown's wearing in his lapel.
These types of variations of color and creating of imagery has been known for years. It's just now there's freedom to use it at the film level.
The siren scene, it worked best in a way. The siren scene has two sections. It's where they meet the sirens and when then George and Tim, their characters, wake up later on, having slept off their hangover, and they see John Turturro's character's clothes sitting there, and John's nowhere to be found, right? And so that whole second part, when the sirens and John Turturro disappeared, it's got a slightly different look than the first part. And the first part, we went for quite a saturated sort of look with separating the green of the trees and making it a very kind of rich golden color. The chain gang scene at the beginning and the end, that's again something the guys said they wanted to basically start with a black and white image and gradually go into a color film. This is one of their ideas from very early on. We thought, well, let's just go from a fairly pastel black and white and gradually bring the color in on that scene.
There are so many tools now, so many ways that they can vary the color, For instance, the very last scene in the movie, as George Clooney is walking with Holly Hunter and walking with the children in tow, I believe the color in the movie became a character. I believe it washes over the audience as you view it as a character. It lets you feel the period of time. It lets you feel the heat in the air. It lets you feel the sweat on their body. And that is something that the filmmaker could not capture in camera and could only use digital technology to let them capture that.
It takes courageous filmmakers like the Coen brothers and Roger Deakins to present us with this type of practical example.
I think technology knows no bounds, really. Yeah, I think eventually cinema will be electronic. Before it's anything else, it'll change again probably after that. And that's going to have a huge effect on the nature of movie making and movies. I mean, it's going to open up a whole new way of being able to create images. The next evolution will be, as I say, you shoot film, you scan it into the digital world, you never see that film again.
So, since film is a two-dimensional medium, it really only operates on an X and Y axis. But when you start adding layers to your images to add depth, you're introducing a third dimension, the Z-axis. So now that we're talking in 3 dimensions, let's talk about the use of 3D space with your 2-dimensional graphics. You can place 2-dimensional or flat images on multiple layers or planes to create a highly realistic or highly stylized 3-dimensional perspective, like in the opening of the HBO series Carnival. In a similar vein, you can layer multiple planes of video through compositing, which can be used to create an overwhelming effect, like in this clip from The Matrix Reloaded. We've already mentioned keying, which is either removing one color or removing all but one color, isolating colors in the frame. And there are really two methods for keying, for removing that color. There's luma keying, which is going to be removing lighting values, either the highlights or the shadows from the original shot. And there's chroma keying, which will remove one color from the original shot. Commonly, it will be a vibrant blue or green, like you see green screen, but it is possible to chroma key out any color, particularly with today's technology. Check out this featurette by Robert Rodriguez about the use of chroma keying in his visually stunning film version of Frank Miller's Sin City.
Hello, this is Robert Rodriguez, and this is the 15-minute flick school, Sin City. At the end of 2003, when I got the idea to make this movie, I had already finished doing several sequels, where I had used those as a very safe place to learn about lighting and digital photography and coming up with new ways to do special effects, becoming my own production designer. And so for my next project, I was looking for something that would really challenge me in those areas, something to push me in a new direction. So I was thumbing through my old collection of Sin City books. I realized we could do this now with cinema, using all the tricks I had been learning over the years. The simplicity of Frank's images also offered the biggest advantage. I could control the budget. Because if ever we ran out of money, I could simply put in a very dark background, and we'd still be faithful to the book. However, that's not what happened. Friendly competition set in, which is always a great thing in a lower budget movie, getting the different effects houses pitted against each other to see who would make the best story. And everyone went beyond all that they were required to do and delivered images that were incredibly stunning and a lot of times realistic when they didn't need to be. On my first test, I took some of the more difficult ideas to see if they would fly. White silhouettes, very blown out backgrounds, faces in shadow, you still see their eyes. Things that were stylistic signatures of Frank's books I wanted to try to pull off in these first tests, because I knew if we could do those, then everything else that wasn't as dramatic or showy would still work. That led us to shooting the opening scene, which was done as a test to kind of try out these more realistic backgrounds. So Josh Hartnett, Marley Shelton came down for a day and we shot them on the green screen. I then worked out these images over the period of about a week and a half with my effects team there at Troublemaker Digital. So this allowed us to put in very simple yet expanded backgrounds from the original books, which would fall somewhere between a stylized reality in the books that Frank had drawn. So a background like this in the book would look like this in the movie. A little more finished out and with a tonality that would match the skin tones. Sometimes we'd go more 2D altogether, depending on the shot and which story we were in. For instance, like in The Yellow Bastard, that's the most sparse in the movie because that's how the book was drawn as well. So one of the things I tried to figure out early on was the bandages, Mickey Rourke's bandages. That's sort of something that's applied not only to his look, but to any kind of blood that is white or anything, anytime you have something that's supposed to be dark, again, in a shadow and you want to see it. So we tried this fluorescent tape method. By shining a blue light on the orange tape, it would glow even in the shadow area. So we can then take that and in post, make it white. And we did that with blood. We did that with Hartigan's tie. The Hartigan scar, we would use fluorescent makeup on his head so that when you'd hit it with a blue light, it would shine. We'd be able to pull a matte from it and turn it white later and control how much white we put in that shadow area. Another trick that Frank uses in his book that you can't really do photographically is he gives everything an edge. This sort of realization early on convinced me that we'd have to make the movie in green screen. The only way we'd be able to isolate actors from their backgrounds, and a lot of times from each other, was to shoot on green screen, because then we could put lights anywhere, give them the edge that's needed when you shoot black and white. Because when you're shooting in color, color helps separate images from each other. But when you shoot in black and white, people will just tend to blend into their backgrounds or into each other. If you look at any other black and white movie, they're really more gray and white movies. They don't have as much black as we do. I like that style in Frank's book, and I wanted to do that in the movie, so we separated everybody and chose their costumes very carefully, and would use layering in order to separate people from the backgrounds. So when you have someone running through a forest, this would be impossible to keep a constant edge light on them to separate them from the trees. But because we're shooting green screen, I can put him on a treadmill, I can edge light him, creating a very graphic image. That was the thing that excited me most about the lighting, is I could finally put lights anywhere I wanted on the set and get the result that you want, and have that sort of perfection to the images that you couldn't do on a normal set because of the limitations of framing and light spill. You take the bathroom, for instance. A stylistic thing you would do in cartooning is to take the tile and make it black with a white grout when it's in a shadow area. And when it gets to a bright area, you would reverse it, making it a white tile with a black grout. Now, unless we went in and hand painted everything this way on a real set, we really couldn't get this effect. It's not realistic, but to your mind's eye, it would work. You have these layers of unreality being presented as the world that you're in when you're in Sin City. People ask why the different colors of blood. Well, you got the yellow bastard blood, which was really blue blood when we photographed it. The white blood, which Frank would use sometimes, like in The Big Fat Kill, when Jackie Boy's arm gets cut off, he had drawn it with white blood spewing everywhere. And then sometimes I chose red blood. I found that when Bruce Willis or Mickey Rourke were bloody, it just looked like their faces were dirty. And when you want the audience to feel the pain that they're going through, you want to see that blood. So I experimented with, in post-production, I tried bringing up just the red, and it worked much better. It had this effect of being almost like a color close-up, where all you saw was the red. And that was a really dramatic effect. Somewhere in the middle of shooting, I started telling Frank that I might be pulling more color into the movie as I found necessary in editing, and explained one of the ideas would be taking Goldie and making her gold. And Frank said, oh, you're using color as a weapon. I like that. So that sort of became the idea for the film, was to use color when needed, if it was going to highlight an idea or create a different abstraction or concept. So how do you go about doing something like this? Well, years ago, I started my own effects company to not only develop ideas that I had, but also to finish out shots if need be. Any of the bigger conceptual ideas or stunt shots with cars, I had my guys work out first. And then once we had it blocked out, I would then turn it over to the other effects houses to finish. Things that needed a lot more development in a look, I would do with my guys. But that's how you get to make something that's very new and very different and experimental, is by having your own effects company. It's just a necessary thing these days. The other way to save money on a movie like this, and because we're shooting green screen, is to shoot very fast. And the actors love moving that fast. The first day on green screen is always the hardest.
Can I just go home, please? Can I just go back to Los Angeles, please? Okay, great. I don't want to go to school.
Excuse me, miss. I was wondering if you could help me. I'm looking for somebody.
After that, they all get in the swing of things.
Hey! Long fucking years, you fucking brat!
So long, Junior. Been a pleasure.
Someone like Brittany Murphy was there for only one day, even though she's in all three stories. For instance, she never met Bruce Willis. This sequence here is very odd. Mickey Rourke walks into the bar. There's Jessica Alba, which she was there a whole month after Mickey was gone. He sits down at a table and he's served by Brittany Murphy, who shot one of the last days of shooting, long after Mickey was gone. Then she turns and sees Dwight, who wasn't there at this point when we had shot this. We'd shot this about a week before she showed up. And she serves him a drink. And then Dwight looks over at Mickey, and it's why I'm my own editor, because you don't have to create a little roadmap for yourself. You've got it all in your head, and you can just shoot very quickly and efficiently, because time is of the essence in something like this, with this many actors in this type of movie. Mickey Rourke never met Jessica Alba, so in a scene like this, I'm reading off camera with Mickey, and we put a stand in there for him to look at as an eye line. When Jessica arrived to shoot her scenes for The Yellow Bastard, we picked up these shots from Marv's story. I would sit there and read with Jessica, and then we'd put them together in post. Mickey Rourke and Rutger Hauer never met, We shot Mickey's material first, and I showed that to Rutger when he arrived about 8 months after we filmed Mickey. And I did this one shot of them together, which I put a camera move on in post to make it look a little more handheld, to make it feel like they were actually in frame together. But again, they never met.
Believe it or not, Elijah Wood and Mickey Rourke never met each other either.
Even though they're having whole entire fight sequences together. Elijah Wood is fighting with Mickey's double, and Mickey is fighting with Elijah's double. And because I'm the editor, and because a lot of this is drawn out already in the books, I can take a shot like this of Mickey getting kicked in the face, have Mickey's real face, and then 4 weeks later have Elijah Wood come in and throw his foot into frame. We had some special effects makeup in this movie. The Yellow Bastard, Mickey Rourke is Marv. But there's something else I wanted to try. If you look at these shots of Elijah, there's something really creepy and odd about them. Besides keeping his eyes light in the darkness, you don't really notice until you see what it looked like before. This is him before, and then this is him after. I just did a little bit of a change on his shift on his chin. He has a very recognizable chin, and I wanted him, when he was in silhouette especially, not to be so recognizable, and he liked the result quite a bit. About a fourth of the shots I did this on. Because our green screen was so small, shots like this that seem very dynamic, where the camera cranes up and over and around and spinning around the car, we don't really move the camera, we just move the car. There isn't room to move the camera on that green screen. We need a 360-degree green screen. Since we just have a small area, we have wires attached to the car, and we start by having the car facing the green screen and then spin it towards camera. And all we're doing with the camera, if you notice, is we're booming the camera up and then booming it back down. We're not climbing over the car at all. But once you put the background in, it appears that way. And since I've shot so many movies on green screen now, you just automatically start thinking backwards like this. So if we ever had an extra idea, like Frank came over at one point and said, I want to get a shot where blood hits Miho's face and she doesn't blink, because they've never done that in a samurai movie. I shot her with her eyes open, and in the same take, I had her close her eyes, and then we splattered her with blood. By doing that, I was able to keep her open eyes from previous in the take and superimpose it over her face when the blood hits it. Watch the all green screen version. You can see what the movie looked like when we were done shooting. That's one of the special features on here. It's just the entire movie shown on green screen, and you can see what little we had to work with and how much work needs to be done later on in post. This movie was going to be so different from how regular movies were shot that we got into trouble with the DGA, who said, oh, well, co-directors can't have co-directors. It usually doesn't work. How did it work with Frank? Well, we both shared something in common. He loved his material, and I loved his material, so we didn't really want to stray from that. I really wanted to translate it directly to the screen. And if you read his books, you see that he's already a director. He was just working with paper instead of a camera. I really wanted to emulate that in the movie and make the cinematic equivalent of his book. Frank had some very specific directions sometimes, like he didn't like how this mercenary was holding his gun. It wasn't his visual or how he would have drawn it, so you see him adjusting the gun, and the guy's looking at him like, what the hell is he talking about? But of course, he's not seeing what Frank's seen. So if you want to have fun, learn your technology. The technology helps push the art form and create new ideas. And learn it. It's all there in your house already. They've already created smaller versions of all these programs that you can have on your laptop. Sometimes they come on your laptop, built in, or on your home computer. And with digital home video cameras, you can already be doing everything that we're doing here and more. So have fun, be creative, and good luck. I'll talk to you next time. Bye.
I'm not here.
Just so the old fart could hold on to some hope of having a grandson. Line, fuck.
Matting involves creating a digital or physical painting, or using previously shot footage known as a plate and combining that with newly shot footage on real sets with real props and real actors. Before the advent of keying, matting was the way you got fantastic and impossible backgrounds in your footage.
What I loved so much about the exterior of Cloud City was the subtlety of the sky, of the lighting. Elegance is what it's all about. Very few people can pull that off, even today with CGI.
So what are we looking at here?
Here is just a wonderful example of all these stormtroopers, and nobody knows that it's a matte painting. You just assume that this is a very large set. So there are some real stormtroopers on the set, and then the rest were added by the matte artist.
Masking, also known as garbage matting, is a technique which allows you to free draw a shape on your footage that can be used to mask certain areas of the frame, either the interior of the mask or the exterior, and you can use keyframes to animate the shape of your mask as time progresses on your timeline. The opening credits to Spider-Man 2 are a very simple but stylistically awesome example of masking.
She looks at me every day. Mary Jane Watson. Oh boy, if she only knew how I felt about her. But she can never know. I made a choice once to live a life of responsibility, a life she can never be a part of. Who am I? I'm Spider-Man, given a job to do. And I'm Peter Parker, and I too have a job.
Parker! Now, subtle is the name of the game, less is more when it comes to drop shadow. Here are some 2-minute effects. The Wiggler is an animation technique that creates a jagged, erratic sort of movement. You can use a little or you can use a lot, depending on your desired effect.
Come on, Podbean, come on!
There we go. It's like my mind refuses to believe what I'm seeing. Hearing Crockett make those awful screams. Just writing about it gives me the shivers.
Come on.
It was like Tommy was possessed or something. There was a hate in his eyes.
Are you okay?
Where am I? What the hell's going on?
A LumaMat is a type of matting in which images and textures can be viewed through the silhouette of text or a graphic. So this mat plus this footage becomes this. Here's another example.
I'm fine. Okay, first place you land, you go. First place you land, you go. Canada.
All right, so hopefully you guys got some good ideas for your opening title credits that you're going to be handing in at the end of the month for your short film. And thanks so much for watching.